And so the amount of housing is not changing, and people are fundamentally changing how they use that housing. And when you go back to the supply and demand, the supply keeps increasing and the demand seemingly is not increasing at the same pace. And so even if there is a shred of a housing crisis right now, it is on the decline and the affordability crisis is not really improving.
All right, Hart, Rent Panda in the building again. How many times has it been?
3, 4?
Yeah, about that. Probably 4.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're always on the road with you guys. So
Yeah. Cool, man. Good to see you again. Thanks for making the trek.
My pleasure. Listen, I don't have air conditioning at home right now. So this is a nice, cool room. For context, it's 30 degrees outside.
Yeah. Is it broke? Like you just broke down or you just do not have AC?
We do not have AC in our relatively new home, like new for us. It's an older home.
Okay.
They are installing hopefully on Tuesday, but my little 4-month-old just woke up bathed in sweat this morning. We're all sweating. So it's nice to be in AC.
It's been a hot one.
It's been a hot one.
Yeah. One of our properties, the AC broke down on Friday and I think they fixed it finally on Tuesday evening.
Yeah.
And I mean, and that whole weekend was a shit show.
So fixed, you didn't have to replace.
Not fixed. We had to go brand new.
Okay.
And then the problem was that the AC that my guy installed is a new AC. So it's got like a lifetime warranty on it. So I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Let's go with that one.
Yeah.
And of course, with these new ACs, they've got like 1 million, electronic component and chips and everything. And then it was the first time he installed it. And so there was a faulty board. Either faulty board or faulty wiring or faulty whatever.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah.
That's why I like analog cars. When something breaks, it's mechanical. Yeah. Nowadays, it's all chips. Yeah. But the good thing about being a real estate investor, property manager in this world, though, is my 120-year-old house. I was like, I don't want to put in, a ducted system and this and that. And got an awesome hookup for heat pumps through a Canadian company. Ordered them myself. Got someone to install them, or they're installing them on Tuesday. So saved a buttload of money with the heat pump system. So it'll be cool to actually try it out in my primary because we've seen heat pumps in ADUs and newer units for a long time. Yep. And it's going to be the only AC system in our house.
Right. So, yeah. You know what, though? It helps coming out to those property tours.
For sure. For sure. Yeah.
Like, hey, I like this system. This will work in my house.
Yeah.
And they've come a long way, right?
Yeah,
and
for sure.
The improvements and what they can handle in the cold temperatures.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Wi-Fi enabled. It'll be pretty awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think people want to learn more about what's happening in the market today. There was a report that just recently came out from CMHC, 2025 mid-year rental market update.
Yeah.
Why don't we dive into that? Because I think if we dive into that particular report, that's just going to open up a ton of questions.
For sure.
And to understand the state of where the rental market is today, because it's vastly different from where it was, a few years ago and during COVID and even pre-COVID.
Yeah. And I really wish more investors spent time with reports like these and listening to podcasts like this.
Yeah.
Because these trends that are now being reported with data are things that we've been talking about for 6, 9, 12 months. And a lot of landlords haven't rented their place in 2-3 years, maybe even longer. And so they perceive the rental market to be as it was a couple of years ago. And it's not what it was even 6 months ago. So diving into the data is really, really important. But looking at the data, it came out about a week ago now.
Why don't we do this then? So where was the state of the market, say during, 2020 to 2023? Because that's when it maybe started shifting, right? Or no, mid 2022.
Yeah. There was some big shifts in 2023 for sure. But ultimately, the core nugget was demand was far surpassing supply. Right. There was a housing crisis. There still is a housing crisis, but we'll talk about that in a bit.
Yeah. I definitely want to get into that.
Yeah, major housing crisis. There was a massive amount of demand for rental housing. Immigration numbers were like we've never seen before until the doors closed through COVID, but reopened, and then massive amounts of new immigrants, especially international students, came through the door. And so rents were going through the roof. Landlords had their pick of the litter in terms of placing tenants. Properties were renting incredibly quickly, and money was also really cheap. Right? So everyone and their mother wanted to buy a rental property because all of the factors were in alignment.
Yeah.
Then things shifted and the market slowed a little bit. And the big dramatic shift that happened in the last year or so, the same factors changed essentially. So supply increased and demand dropped, which fundamentally changed the market. At its core, that's all we're talking about.
Right.
It's supply and demand.
And so then supply increased, meaning that now there's a lot more rentals in the marketplace.
Yep.
And I would say, and you jump in here, is that probably is a result of now you have more investors in the game, maybe that didn't want to be an investor, became an accidental investor, because now the prices of homes that they bought it, if they bought it, say in 2020 to 2022, mid 2022, have now come down in price. Mm-hmm. And so then now maybe they wanted to flip it. Maybe they didn't want to hold it, but they're almost left with no choice.
Yep.
And so then now they got to rent it out. Is that a fair assessment based on you being a property manager and seeing what's happening in the market?
For sure. And there's a very large perfect storm that is happening. So that's kind of one segment of why the supply is increasing and the demand is dropping.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the demand side for a second. Mm-hmm. So on the demand side, the rental market was largely driven by new immigrants and international students. We all know that started to dry up with a change in government policy about a year ago and has really come into effect now.
Right.
So that the numbers are dropping quite considerably.
What were the numbers? I mean, I've heard different reports in regards to immigration on a yearly basis there when they were doing what they're doing for those 2-3 years.
Yeah. Every report will tell you a different number, essentially.
Exactly.
When it comes to the percentage drop, I've heard, 20 to 30% essentially less new immigrants are coming through the door than at the peak, essentially.
Okay.
So it's substantial. Right?
Yeah.
And especially on the university student side, international students have dropped quite dramatically. And even those that have come, a lot are going back home because they don't have the opportunities after school.
Right.
So international students who then turned into, full PR residents, that has dropped off quite considerably.
Yeah. There's a report that I saw, or at least heard anyways, is that what they were looking at, because I think over the last 2 months, we've almost been like net zero in regards to immigration. And what they take a look at, which I thought was actually pretty clever, is they look at cell phone activations.
Right.
And cell phone activation is a great way, because as soon as you get to a country, what do you need? You need a cell phone right away. So they're saying there's actually been net zero over the last 2 months in regards to cell phone activation. Not meaning that people are still coming in, but there's also the NPRs or the non-permanent residents that are actually leaving, creating a net zero.
And it's probably in the minus with that factor, because a lot of people are migrating out of the province, but staying in the country.
Right.
So as an Ontario-based investor, we're losing a lot of people to Alberta, to BC, to out east, not like in the COVID times, but we still are losing a lot of people. So the demand is fundamentally dropping.
Right. And so then before, you would just use Kijiji, Facebook Marketplace, and you'd be able to rent your properties just like that.
Yeah.
Like you just say for rent.
Yeah.
And people would just show up.
Yeah. We used to have places just listed on Facebook Marketplace that would go up and be rented out within, let's call it like 4 to 5 days. But on that first night of posting, you would get 200 to 300 messages. It was an onslaught. And a lot of people hired us as leasing specialists, as a tenant placement agency, because they couldn't handle the overwhelming demand. And so people thought, it was the factor of time. They wanted to save themselves that time of going through it. And, we see this on the HR side too. The job market is not ideal right now. If you post a job, you have hundreds of applicants applying within minutes, and it's tiring to go through. So that's what landlords were facing back then. Now that has dried up considerably. And on the supply side, not only is the factor that you were talking about incredibly true, but the condo market has greatly affected the overall supply of rental housing. So when money was cheap and when there was a lot of incentives for developers, condos shot up. And it takes, 5 to 10 years to put up condos in Toronto, especially in other urban centers.
Yeah.
And 80% roughly of those units were sold to investors.
Right.
And they were sold under the assumption that rents will always go up and your property will always increase in value, especially when you look at Toronto.
And the crazy part was as well too, is when they were buying these condos, right across the street, you would have a pre-sale condo that was maybe going for, I don't know, 900, 1,000 a square foot. And they were buying these new builds at like 1,500 a square foot.
Yeah, at the peak, it was hitting those numbers. Right?
Yeah.
And people didn't want to miss out, right? They had talked to people that had made a lot of money in pre-construction condos. And so they jumped on the bandwagon. And then as the tide started to shift, a lot of these units came into occupancy. And there was a mass amount of supply.
Right.
And that supply increase caused a ripple effect through the market where, someone who was maybe looking at a 1-bedroom on the main floor of a house, all of a sudden had a lot more options on the condo side of things. And condo rental prices were depressing. And then they could move into a building that had better amenities than the main floor of that house or the basement unit. And so the gap started to shrink. And so the supply increased. But in the last 18 months or so, the new builds have really slowed down or stopped altogether. So the amount of housing starts that we've seen is the lowest amount in the last 30 years. And we've talked about this on property tours, but the condo builders are not building condos anymore at even close to the same rate.
Yeah, and I want to get into the whole CMHC MLI Select and how people or developers are now shifting from building condos into purpose-built multifamilies. But we'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, so then now going back to what you're saying, that you would post a rental ad and you would get about 200 to 300 inquiries that same day or evening.
Yeah.
What is it now? How has it change and what are you specifically doing to then get more traction for your rentals or the listings that you have out there?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's fundamentally what we're constantly chasing after on the leasing side. It's how to build enough volume to rent out a property. Because there's a model. And right now, if you post a listing, you can expect between 1,000 and 2,000 impressions overall within a week or so. If you're properly priced, aggressively priced, and your place is in decent condition and you're in a half decent sized market, anywhere in the GTA, any mid-sized city essentially. So 1,000 to 2,000 impressions will lead to about 30 to 50 messages, and that's in a week now. Of those messages, we're seeing about 10% conversion into showings. So let's call it 50 messages on the top end. You're doing 5 showings in a week. And then conversion into leases or applications and then leases is another 10%.
That's crazy.
5 people come out to see the place.
Yeah.
Statistically, 0 of them apply. You need 10 showings to yield 1 application.
What kind of percentage drop is that then?
Like 90% drop off.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And what we're seeing even more acutely in Toronto in the GTA is if you're not incredibly aggressively priced, the drop-off rates are 98, 99%. And this is happening in the pre-construction condo world where you've got a condo up. Let's say I'm listing my 1-bedroom for $2,500. All of a sudden, one person in that building drops their 1-bedroom to $2,400. 10 other identical units drop to $2,400. Now it's crickets at my unit. Now everyone that has booked a showing for Friday morning has no-showed, right? And no one's got the decency to actually cancel, so they all no-showed.
That's interesting because, that almost translates even into the real estate sales side of things, where you're almost like it's a race to be the lowest priced property, whether it's a condo or a freehold in that particular style of property, whether it's a bungalow or a townhouse or whatever. And you got to be, it's almost like a race to the bottom.
Yeah. And as a salesperson, same way on the real estate sales side as on the leasing side, how do you convince an owner to be the first to take that lower price? And I was just doing the math this morning. If you have a $2,000 rental and I can say to you, it'll take us 5 days to rent out your place if you drop the price, or it'll take us 35 days to rent out the place at the current price. By the math of a year-long lease, I could drop your price by $166 on that $2,000 rental to equivalent, to make that equivalent, right? Because $166 a month over that 12 months is around that $2,000 mark. 98% of the clientele that we speak to on a day-to-day basis don't want to shoot out the door on day one and list that $2,000 rental that is comparable for $1,840, right? That's a considerable drop, but when you look at the year, it's the exact same amount of revenue.
And you know what the hard part is as well too, is that when immigration was at its peak, you're buying investment properties based on, let's say if it's a student rental, on what was it in Peterborough, Quentin? You can it's $600 a door, $650.
No,
then it went. Then it went to like $950 a door.
People are pushing 1,000 at times.
And so then you run your numbers at those rental prices per door, and then now it's come down, and so they're like, well, I can't lower it that extra $200 because I've ran my numbers and my pro forma at this rate.
Yeah, and I think no one could see the dramatic drop that happened. That's just the reality. It is a bit of a perfect storm. And a lot of people are suffering, but a lot of people are holding onto that property because they can't sell, right? So many of our clientele are coming to us now saying, hey, you know what? We decided to upgrade and we tried to sell our property and it wouldn't move. So we need to rent it out.
Yeah.
And then they're saying, well, they're not investors, right? They're just homeowners that are keeping a property. And then they say, well, to cover these costs, we need X. And to me, like my skin crawls when I hear a landlord or investor say, I need X, because they're coming from a point of an emotional state where they think a property has to cash flow or at least break even. And they're in this just as a holdover where they're trying not to lose money.
Right.
And I think you said this years ago, and it was, you were the first person that ever said this in a room, which I thought was very brave, but it was about like evaluating your portfolio for those redlining properties and dumping properties that made sense to remove out of your portfolio to allow the others to survive.
Right.
And so many people don't have a portfolio to look at, and they're just holding on to these properties that are, by all intents and purposes, redlining.
Yeah.
And they're getting into really dangerous waters where it's not going to rent for what they think it should rent for, or what they need, and it's not going to sell for what they want. And they're just kind of stuck in the middle.
Right.
Yeah.
What is the percentage of drop, would you say now, in regards to rent price? And I'm sure it probably varies from municipality to municipality.
Yeah. So if you look at the CMHC data, one will read that it is 3.7% year over year across the country or the province. I forget which one.
So it says right here in Q1 2025 declines between 2 to 8%,
right,
compared to the same period a year earlier.
Yeah. Okay. So the overall number is like 3.7.
Yeah.
But the real point to look at, and we've stressed this many a time, is you need to look at your region and your asset within that region.
Exactly.
Because if you look at a pre-construction condo in downtown Toronto, the numbers are closer to 15%. So that's a huge drop if you've run your pro forma with a certain number in mind. And even when we look at some of the markets that were hot, like Peterborough used to be really hot, those numbers have dropped quite dramatically. When you look at 1-bedroom units versus 3-bedroom units, the 1-bedrooms have taken a significant hit. The 3-bedrooms have maintained a little bit more value because people are looking for bigger units these days, multifamily style living. But the numbers are quite dramatic when you look at specific segments of the market.
So then what are you doing different then to get these rentals rented? I think I asked that, but I don't know if we...
Yeah, we didn't answer it.
Yeah, we didn't answer it. Okay, good.
So, no, it's perfect. Perfect bringing us back. So ultimately, we're treating the job as a job and spending more time, spending more money, and being more aggressive. And one of our core values at Rent Panda is radical honesty is the policy. So we are not beating around the bush when it comes to telling landlords that they are out to lunch with a rental price that they're trying to get. Mm-hmm. We'll advertise it, but we will sit here for 2 months and it will not move at that price. So we are being radically honest. We are spending a lot more time. So we're on the platforms a lot more. We're responding to every single message under the sun. We're having more conversations on platform. So whereas we used to be able to say, hey, go fill out this super long application, in those days of 400 messages, we're having native conversations on Facebook, on rentals.ca, on Kijiji to keep people engaged. We're implementing auto response bots so that we can respond immediately to people, which pulls them away from other people's listings and engages them with us.
Yeah. And this is where you can use automation, AI.
Yep.
Yeah. We do the same thing as well. As soon as the message comes in, boom, somebody, it's automated. They get a response.
Exactly.
Email and text.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And doing that on platform is sometimes really difficult. Like doing it on Facebook, is incredibly hard. Facebook doesn't want bots, scanning around Facebook.
Right.
So we're investing in those systems, and we're just spending more. So we used to be able to just post on Facebook, post on, Rent Panda alone, and rent out a property. Now we're posting out across 8 to 10 platforms, right? And we're spending on all those platforms. So a Kijiji post used to do it. Now we need a Kijiji top spot and a promoted post. We spend, $25 to $50 per week per ad on Facebook advertising. We spend on rentals.ca and RentSync. We spend on all of these other platforms because we need to be at the top of every list. We need to be engaging users. We spend more on our marketing materials, right? We're going to get better photos, get better videos. It's all about doing as much as we possibly can, and not to be super competitive, but essentially we need to set ourselves out from the competition.
Yeah.
So all those individual landlords who think I'm going to take less than ideal photos, post them out. Some of them are sideways. Here's a toilet seat up. They're going to be the ones that get passed over, especially if we are comparable on price.
Yeah.
And then we're looking at some of the multifamily operators in terms of what incentives are necessary in order to move properties. So not only dropping the price, but also giving out half month's rent or a full month's rent free, move-in bonuses, right? Paying for people's moving, giving free parking, giving free utilities, giving them Home Depot gift cards, whatever it ends up being. You really have to work hard these days to get those top quality tenants.
This reminds me of what it was like when we first started Q, and I wrote a rent to home book on it and talking about like how to advertise. Yep. And it's the same thing. Like there was like probably like, 7, 8, 10 different places that we advertised.
Yep.
Then we also wrote our ads very nice.
Yep.
Like, hey, welcome to this child-friendly neighborhood. And as soon as you walk in, you're going to feel just at home with this beautiful kitchen. And imagine your and so you had to paint this picture. And then we would do like video walkthroughs. But you were doing everything you could because the whole thing was about treating your tenants like gold.
Yep.
And then it completely just went away during COVID. It was like for rent.
Yep.
And I think that's why you probably also saw the friction between landlords and tenants and the way that the rents skyrocketed so fast.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think at the time there was an opportunity, right? And so when there's high demand, you can push your prices up if you've got all the supply in the world.
Yep.
And then we created this massive gap. And this is my unpopular opinion, but I think rents still do need to drop a little bit more. And then I think they need to stagnate for a considerable amount of time. And as an investor, I hate myself for saying it, but ultimately the stability of the rental market needs to be there for a year or two to reset expectations. And then it can start to climb again and grow stably. And I think to your point about like a pro forma, doing your numbers very, very conservatively, understanding that there may be more rent decreases, that there will be a point of stagnancy, even if that's not true and I'm wrong and rents start to go up again, you'll be in a much better shape. And so as an investor, we're still buying. We're doing very conservative estimates. We're still buying properties. We're buying properties in the asset base that we know are doing well based on our data and our experience. So there's still opportunity, but you just have to be conservative these days.
Yep. I agree, Hart, because people don't understand wages aren't going up.
No.
They're not going up at those rates. So how are you going to find quality tenants, right? 30% and the income rent ratio, that's, now we're 35, even pushing higher 30s. So there's no way these rents can continue to climb. It has to stabilize.
And there's a crazy number in that report that states that 38% of renters, tenants, pay 50% or more of their income on rent these days.
Yeah, and that's wild because what should it be? 30%, 33%?
The age
on average?
Yeah, the age-old rule is 30%.
Yeah.
We crept up to like a solid 40% for a while there.
Yep.
But when you look at the affordability, it's not as bad as it was in 2024 because of the decreases, but it is still not a healthy metric.
Right. And then just to add to what you've said now, there's two big things that I want to touch on. One is this is where now, with the changes that the city has made, where now you can convert a single family home into, what are you can go up to like 6 units? I think actually 7, including the garden suite. You can go up to like 7 now. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it,
right? Which
is incredibly important because now you're chopping up a home and you're going to have like 6 studios. right? And the demand may not be there.
Right. Well, now you're competing with the pre-construction that has 15 of those units that are for rent right now.
Yeah, all those, all those small condos, 400 square feet, 350 square feet. And then the other thing as well too is that you have to be concerned with is, I don't know how many more condos are coming online, but I think it's got to be around probably like 60 to 80,000 is the numbers that I've heard.
Yep.
And so you've still got all those condos still to come online.
Yeah.
And that's going to add a ton more rentals to the soft market that we're in right now.
Yeah. And one of the key things and the power of AI with a report like that CMHC report is it's really dense. No one has an excuse not to read it in the next month because you actually don't need to read it. Plop it into ChatGPT or any other AI tool, have it disseminate the insights that are relevant to you as an investor and spit them out. The crazy thing is the purpose-built rental market, to your point before, Gary, is now catching up. And so the condo developers have stopped, but where's all that money gone? There's a lot of money in the market. They shifted their dollars into purpose-built rentals.
Yeah.
And so the housing starts are at an all-time low, I think 30-year low, the number of purpose-built rentals is at a 10-year high or maybe more.
Yeah.
And so CMHC has said, expect higher vacancy rates, right? We should expect higher vacancy rates, which means rents will continue to drop to level that out. And that's because more condos are going to drop. And as soon as those condos get eaten up, that's when the purpose-built rentals are going to be ready. Fitzrovia, if you look around downtown Toronto or all the way up to like Lawrence now, or even Wilson, there are Fitzrovia buildings popping up all over town.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right. And those units, with those buildings, 5, 6, 7, 800 purpose-built rentals in a building, that will do significant things to the rental market.
That's a lot.
And they're even reaching out to realtors. Here's our package. And they're hungry. They're going aggressive for those tenants.
Yeah. They're giving away 2 months rent on a 2-year lease. Like they need to move those places. And so if you've got a triplex, in the GTA in general, you are now going to be competing with Fitzrovia, who's trying to move a 2 or 3 bedroom unit and giving away 2 months rent free parking for a year, no water bills for a year, whatever it ends up being. And as much as you say that is not comparable is something like a home in the eyes of a tenant.
Right.
And we just don't look at comparables like we used to, where it's like, 2 bedroom with great finishes in a high-rise building. No, it's roof over your head, number of bedrooms. That's pretty much it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be very interesting over the next. What are your thoughts in regards to timeline when things maybe start to balance out? Because again, you're going to get a ton of new rentals that's going to flood the market. I would think within the next, probably next 2 to 4 years.
Yeah.
Right.
We used to hear the adage of like survive till 2025. I think that for me as an investor, I'm looking out to like 2028.
Yeah.
And I think
it's a fair assessment.
Yeah. I think maybe in 2027, we'll start to see some shift. But I would expect 2025 to see continued rent declines. I don't think it's going to be as aggressive as it was over the last 12 months, but things will still trend downwards, especially in urban centers in the GTA. I think they'll stagnate for a little while in 2026, and then we may start to see, some movement in 2027. But 2028 is really where I think things will start to change. And the other thing to note is government policy clearly has a huge effect on the rental market. We saw that with the shift from condo developers being condo developers to purpose-built rental developers because of the CMHC MLI Select program, right? It was, again, another crazy number from that report. 88% of purpose-built rentals in 2024 were funded through CMHC and or the CMHC MLI Select program.
Right.
The year before, it was 56%. The year before, it was in the 30s. So you can look at the program and say, oh yeah, of course, this is a program that has always supported this much rental housing. Well, it hasn't. And it's a great program to finance these purpose-built rentals, but it's now being tapped into like never before.
Yeah.
And so that is going to continue, and that is going to surge, that supply of purpose-built rental housing for the foreseeable future, because these developers have to spend their money somewhere, right? They've raised a lot of money, they have a lot of money, and it's going to go into purpose-built rentals.
So if an investor is listening to this podcast, at what point in time when they're trying to rent out their property on their own, so they say, all right, I can't do this anymore, I need to reach out to a property manager. Yeah. Well, what stage of the game? Like, how long should they wait?
Not not from a selfish perspective to drive business, but thinking about it as an investor, they shouldn't wait, right? Like no one should try it on their own just to try it on their own. It needs to be an evaluation before you do the task of whether or not it's the right task for you. Because ultimately, like, I don't look at fixing my chimney or installing my AC, right? My heat pumps, right? I looked at the pain point of getting air conditioning in my unit. And I said, you know what? I'm not willing to pay the top tier premium price to get a company to do it all because I have the skill and I kind of like finding a good deal. So I'm going to source the units myself and I'm going to hire a trade to do it, but I'm not going to drill holes in my wall. I'm not connecting lines. I'm not pumping refrigerant into this thing. I'm uncomfortable with it. I'm not skilled to do it. I don't want to spend the time to learn how. I could probably watch a lot of YouTube videos and learn how, but I don't want to spend that time. My time can be spent elsewhere. And the emotional weight of doing that is not worth it, right? I want it done right away. I don't want to think about having done it wrong. I don't want to think about the safety of my family in that house. The same factors go into renting your place, like finding your own tenants or managing your own property. And ultimately it's the time, the money, and the will to do it, or the grit to do it, or the emotional state to do it. So on the first hand, it's the time to do it. We were talking about this, off podcast, off camera, but it's not rocket science to place tenants, right? I've given podcasts, there's lists of things to do. If you tell ChatGPT, put together a list, anyone can do all the things that we're doing, but it is a lot of work, it is a lot of money, and it is a lot of time. And so if you don't want to spend the time doing it, or you don't want to spend the time learning how to do it and then doing it, that's a factor you should figure out before you start. Because even if it takes you 2 days to rent out that property, that is still a time allocation that you should consider before starting it. And these days, it doesn't take 2 days to rent out a property. We're at like the 30 to 40 day mark.
Right.
The money to do it. So some people say, I just can't spend that extra month's rent. And so I would say, when you're buying that property, you should factor in, like you should go through this decision making. So don't even wait until you've acquired the property, but run your numbers with tenant placement or property management or not, right? So are you willing to spend the time to do it? Great. Are you willing to spend the money to do it? Maybe not. So you'll have to invest the time. So that factor needs to be taken into account at the start. And then the emotional weight of doing it. We always say to people, are you going to get annoyed when you get the "is it still available" message on Facebook, right? Are you that type of landlord that writes, "I will not respond to anyone who writes, 'Is it still available?'" Well, we're in a market where you have to respond to "Is it still available?"
Yeah.
Are you the type of landlord that, if you're taking a vacation because you work a hard-earned, wage, and you're taking a vacation on a Saturday afternoon, and the tenant just calls you up saying, "Hey, I'm really sorry, I lost my keys. Do you mind sending out a locksmith?" You don't even have to go there, but do you mind just making the call to a locksmith? I'll pay for it. You have the best tenant in the world. He's going to pay for the locksmith, but you're sitting on a beach, Cherry Beach in Toronto, and you still have to stop, not play with your kids for the 10 minutes, call up that locksmith, get them out to the property, coordinate it all, pay that bill afterwards. If you're that landlord that feels annoyed at doing that, even if you have the absolute best tenant, property management is not for you. Tenant placement has the same qualms. If you send out a lease, everything went smooth. You find someone in 2 days, you send out a lease, and the tenant delays in sending the lease back, right? 6 hours later, they should be followed up with. 12 hours later, they should be followed up with. If you're not willing to do that, not from a time perspective, but just like it annoys you, it makes your skin crawl, it's not for you, then don't even consider doing it yourself. You are in the camp of passive investor and hire it out. And again, I'll say this as an investor myself. We've got rental properties. We invest in international student rentals, which are, the most cumbersome and possibly hand-holding need possible. I hate managing a property. It makes my skin crawl. I run a property management company, but I hire people who don't mind answering those calls, who don't mind getting into a little bit of a scuffle with a tenant or a landlord. Lawyers love to argue. Property managers like to kind of rationalize that as well. But I don't. And so for my properties, my company manages my own properties. And you'd think that we've done this thousands of times. I've personally placed hundreds and hundreds of tenants. I don't want to do it, from my being.
You're right.
So if that is you, if it is going to annoy you, if it's going to hurt your soul, then don't even go into the time and money factor of it.
Right.
And I'll just add quickly, even if you want to go with the property manager the first time, see what they're doing, let them see all the steps they're doing, and then moving forward you can, right? That's a low university education, right? 1 month's rent compared to putting the wrong person in there, which could be quadruple that price.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. You touched on some great points in there. I was talking to one of the agents in our office earlier this morning, and she flipped me over an email with a pay stub. And she's like, hey, does this look legit? And I looked at it, I'm like, yeah, it looks legit, 100%. Mm-hmm. However, when you look at the date, the pay stub is until the end of July. So the end of July hasn't even happened yet. Right. Right? And with technology and how fast it's moving, there's so many things that can be forged now. And, obviously there's other things you can do. You can, ask for bank statements, but even that can be done as well too. And so there's so many good tools out there now.
Yeah.
And if you're not a sophisticated real estate investor, if you haven't been in the game for a very long time and you don't know about open room or you don't know about single keys, and, should you just accept the credit report that they give you as opposed to running your own credit report? Just as little small things can make a drastic change in your experience in real estate investing. Just use the professionals.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what you're saying. It's like, why?
Yeah.
Why take the chance?
Yeah. And there's so many processes and systems that are needed to run things at scale. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, our job every day as a company is not only to find tenants and to manage properties, but on the management side, on the IT side, it's constantly finding new innovation to bring to small landlords. And that's why we existed originally. That's why we exist now. It's enabling landlording to happen. And I truly believe that everyone can be a landlord. I think I've said this before on the podcast, but not everyone should be a landlord, like I talked about, but everyone can be a landlord. And nowadays, small landlords can have access to the tools that, large scale property managers had 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And it's becoming more and more democratized. Mm-hmm. And you can access it yourself, or you can access it through a provider like us. But there is no reason beyond laziness to not go through something like, a formalized credit check, a background check, scanning open room and Canly, doing a full ID verification, right? Mm-hmm. Like we had actually one property in Oshawa where someone came through the door and they were a pastor and they brought their whole family through for that showing. And they gave us all of their documentation, the website for the church that they were a pastor at, gave us their ID. Turns out the church was fake. They were an online YouTube pastor.
That's crazy.
Their ID was fake. And you can't trust anymore without verifying. You can trust, and I'm not saying to think terribly of all the people in this world.
No, but trust and verify.
Trust and verify. So it's really, really important. And not to be harsh, but the only excuse to not do it is laziness. Like there's so many providers out there. There's so many services that can make landlording safe. And every day we look at the horror stories that we hear on Facebook and on other platforms, and it makes my skin crawl. It's like all these people falling victim to these things that can be avoided.
The problem is though, and I know this because I fell victim to it when I first started in the game of real estate investing, is the stories.
Yeah.
And you get caught up in somebody's story and they're just looking for that chance, as opposed to verifying. And all of a sudden now you've got somebody in your rental property for like 6 months or 8 months or a year, when it was really bad.
Well, there was the pastor with the family live and in person, right? To pull on those heartstrings.
Yeah.
Look at my family. This is it. This is what we want to call home.
Yeah.
Right?
And I did that showing. I met them personally.
Yeah.
And it was, and like the guy shook my hand, looked me in the eye, told me a blatant lie and a big weaving story.
The good ones are good.
Yeah, that's why they call it professionals, right? Yeah. We touched on a couple tools there. What are, would you say, 2 or 3 important tools that you guys use to verify tenants? Just high level.
Yeah. I mean, at its core, a credit check and a background check is an absolute mandatory. Mm-hmm. We pull all of those through single key, every single one. We also, if tenants want the single key rent guarantee, we get them pre-approved through it. So all of the parameters that they are going to insure a tenant, we live up to as well.
Okay.
So single key is a big one. But again, there are other service providers out there that provide credit checks and background checks. Do not trust a credit check or background check provided to you by a tenant. It's just, especially with AI these days, you can fake them not in 10 minutes, but in 20 seconds.
Yep.
Open Room is one that, again, is just pure laziness not to search. It probably takes you 20 to 30 seconds to search someone on Open Room, and it will reveal whether there's been a judgment at the landlord tenant board for that tenant. Mm-hmm. So if someone has not paid rent or gone through and caused disturbance in their property or any other issue that's gone through the LTB, they'll pop up on Open Room. And there's many others. I mean, there's ID verification tools. Again, we use Single Key. There's Verifast out there. And one that is constantly forgotten is just Google and social media platforms.
So important.
Right? So it's so important just to Google them and see what comes up. And a lot of people find safety in renting to someone on Facebook because they can see their social profile.
Yeah.
But I would say you need to dig a lot deeper than that. Like, again, social profiles are easy to fake. They're easy to buy these days. People can churn up dozens of social profiles. So you really have to be a little bit of a PI and dig into someone's whole story. And to your point about pay stubs, right? Just getting pay stubs is not enough. Even if that pay stub wasn't, incorrect, get a pay stub, get a letter of employment, get, a T4, get a call to their employer, and don't just call the number that they gave you, who's cousin Jimmy, right? Call the actual HR department if there is one. Yeah. One that we love to do is, you call a landlord reference, but everyone's got a realtor friend, especially anyone listening to this podcast knows a realtor. Check Geo Warehouse for the ownership of that property. And you will very quickly reveal whether it's cousin Jimmy pretending to be the landlord or the actual owner.
You're right. Yeah. And who would have thought that your Facebook profile would have turned out to be your resume 10, 15 years later?
Right.
Like, it's so important now, especially if you're young and you're moving out of your parents' home and you're trying to get your first property. That's your resume.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. Like, one of your leasing agents right now is helping me with one of our properties right now.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing I asked. He's like, hey, we got something for you. Perfect. Let me see their Facebook profile.
Right. Yeah. And it reveals a lot. I mean, actually up in Peterborough, back when I was doing showings as well, one guy walked through the door and was drinking a Laker lager. He was halfway through the beer. He came for a showing, didn't put his beer down at the front door, just came in drinking the beer.
Yeah.
Clearly did not get the property. But if you look at someone's social platforms, they're going to reveal that information a little bit behind the scenes. So it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But to the point about like someone's profile, when we started Rent Panda, we were just a tech company. And our core vision for the platform was actually building a profile-based system. Imagine you had a dating site where your entire rental history was your profile, and you could swipe right or swipe left on landlords and tenants. Right. And only if you matched did you move forward. And you had, user reviews that were culminated the entirety of your profile, right? Like Airbnb, you can rent a place across the world, and that Airbnb host trusts you because of the crowdsourced reviews that you got. And
right.
Sometimes they'll take a risk, but if that existed in the rental industry, it would solve a lot of the problems that we had. But unfortunately, every rental marketplace is selfish in the sense that they want to be the rental marketplace. And there's no unified system. But if there was one, that would dramatically change things.
I think Hart might be onto something in the background here.
No, this is what we were, not what we are anymore.
Yeah. Elon Musk right here in the room. Right? Yeah. It's all about data collection.
Yeah.
I want to touch on housing crisis.
Yep.
Because we did an event earlier this year. And you touched on something where you're like, I don't know if this is a housing crisis.
Right.
And it's been pushed on the mainstream media that is the housing crisis. We don't have enough homes.
Yeah.
I look around now and there's a ton of homes that are available. What are your thoughts on the housing crisis, affordability? Give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So my core thought is any housing crisis that does exist now is completely trumped by the affordability crisis. And the affordability crisis in my eyes is, rents and the rest of the cost of living is fundamentally unaffordable for renters. You hear stats like 38% of people are spending 50% of their income on rental housing. Add to that, a less than ideal economy, high unemployment rates, the salaries are not skyrocketing like they once were. The cost of living has generally increased. And so everything that tenants are dealing with these days in terms of affordability completely trumps the fact that there's a housing crisis. And so when they are looking for housing, they're looking for the lowest cost housing, the lowest cost and the best value. So some people who would typically be looking at, a 2-bedroom basement, maybe they're going to start to gravitate towards a 1-bedroom basement and just cram people in there, right? A 3-bedroom unit that would have previously been, 2 young guys and an office is now going to be 3 young guys. A family who lived in a single family home may now be 2 families living in that single family home. And so the amount of housing is not changing, and people are fundamentally changing how they use that housing. And when you go back to the supply and demand, the supply keeps increasing and the demand seemingly is not increasing at the same pace. Mm-hmm. And so even if there is a shred of a housing crisis right now, it is on the decline, and the affordability crisis is not really improving all that much.
In the rental or in the price of homes?
A little bit of both. So, again, another stat that I didn't dive into as deeply that you guys probably did is just in terms of the number of people that are looking to buy and can afford to buy. And so on the rental side, I think it was like 50% of renters have expressed interest in buying soon, whatever CMHC calls soon, in the near future, probably 12 to 18 months. But something like 12% can actually afford to or expect to be able to afford to. So there's a disparity there between what people want and what people can actually do. Mm-hmm. And it's partially because, the cost of houses hasn't dropped all that dramatically.
What are we at right now? Do you know? What are we at now in regards to house price drops? Say in Durham or Toronto.
It's flatline. Like the sales in June, look solid, but it's going to be flatline, mm-hmm. right? It's
what is it year over year? Maybe what?
June, I don't recall off the top of my head.
Yeah, it was like 3%, 4%.
Yeah, in that it wasn't 3.7, something like that.
Yeah. But I mean, I am starting to see the prices of homes drop. I mean, I just saw a townhouse sell in Pickering for $550.
Yeah,
mm-hmm. I'm seeing townhomes selling in the 6s, like low 6s, even in Pickering and Ajax and Whitby.
Yeah,
so they are coming down.
Yeah,
I mean, listen, man, it was a couple of years ago. Townhomes were going for $1 million.
Yep.
Right.
I just think renters can't get ahead these days, and with everything, that affordability crisis being rent, mm-hmm. Is expensive. The cost of living is expensive. Jobs aren't getting all that much better.
Yeah.
So people just can't catch up to it, and the cost of money is fluctuating, but people are uncertain, and that uncertainty keeps people in these rentals longer, and they're just stuck, and clearly that's happening, and people are downgrading. We see people who were in 1-bedroom units moving back in with parents. We see people who were.
So you're seeing that?
Yeah, for sure. People that owned homes are going back to renting because they think, it's going to be a better use of their money put elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So the market is all upside down right now. But I think as an investor, we need to look at the trends where there is still opportunity and invest in those. Because I think my outlook for 2028 is there will be a housing crisis, and it'll be the worst housing crisis we've seen in my lifetime, at least. Because
not in the condo space, you're talking about the freehold.
Yeah, in general.
Right.
In general, okay. Like the demand outpacing the supply in general.
Right.
Because I think what's going to happen is there's going to be some political pressure over the next, not maybe in the next 12 to 18 months, but looking out 2 years to reopen Canada's doors. We have an aging population. There's going to be pressure from business in general, from the universities, from all those players to mm-hmm. reopen the doors like we once did. And there'll be a surge of immigration. And yeah, I just think that we're going to enter a really, really tough time. And again, the housing starts are at an all-time low. And while these developers are building purpose-built rentals, the time it takes to build is incredibly long. So we're seeing a lot of completions now with purpose-built rentals and a lot of starts in the last 12 to 24 months. But what's going to happen in 4 years, there's going to be a drying up of that supply, and the demand is going to start to outpace.
You know what I'm seeing a lot of as well too, come across my desk is a lot of investors and real estate agents sending over land deals where they actually have the whole schematic of the development to purchase and develop it.
Right.
Meaning that somebody brought it to that level of the game, and they're like, we just can't do it.
Yep.
And you're seeing a lot of that happening where bankruptcies are happening, investors trying to make that next leap or that next power move into that multifamily space, and they weren't able to raise the capital that they thought they could.
100%. We saw that, I mean, very anecdotally, but my old neighborhood, like Batherson Wilson, there was an age-old gas station, Tim Hortons, right on the corner that was there forever.
Yep.
And being the real estate guy, I'm like, why is this corner not a condo? It's a major intersection. And then maybe a year and a half ago, gas station went down. The Tim Hortons is still there. Big sign went up with renderings of 50-floor building with commercial in there. And they started to tear down the gas station, and then it stopped. And 2 weeks ago, I was driving past the old neighborhood, and a for sale sign pops up on that lot. It's like, clearly developer is just, backed away for any reason, and land is still up for sale.
Yeah, it's only the big players that are surviving this market, right? Yeah. On the development side, the guys that tried to graduate into that, and those are the ones that got burned.
Yeah,
right?
I agree. What do you think would be a good investment right now if an investor is listening and saying, okay, you've heard everything that we've talked about on this podcast. This is the type of investment property that you should purchase in this particular market?
No, to give you the roundabout answer, I think it depends on what kind of investor you are, and at what stage of investment life cycle. And so we're seeing kind of the two ends of the spectrum working right now. We're seeing cash flowing properties in smaller markets that still have decently sized growing populations, that have immigration landing in those regions, that have industry that is ever present and stable or growing. Those properties are still doing well, lower appreciating markets, but cash flowing assets.
Yeah.
And the values are going up because more people are now gravitating towards there, which will push up the price of those properties. And then on the flip side, kind of like the property tours that we love to join for you guys, the densification of less densified neighborhoods in urban centers, those properties are still doing well with an eye to the right asset class, right? So the 1-bedroom, cut up studios, you fit 7, units in a tiny little house are not doing well, but the 2+ dens, the 3+ dens, the larger units that can accommodate, a family coming in from overseas who looks at a 2-bedroom, 600 square foot condo, and it's comparable, downtown Toronto, and it's comparably priced to, Caledonia and St. Clair, a 3+ den where they can get more room and live with their family.
Right.
So I think that the densification of those neighborhoods with high appreciating assets where you can add value. And I think one of the developers said, the city is adding the value for you with the rezoning.
Right.
So jump on that and capitalize on it. That's one massive opportunity. And the other is just stable cash flowing assets. And as an investor, we're at the point of our life cycle or portfolio where we just want to build the farm, right? We want to build cash flowing, stable assets. And so we're buying those. We're buying, 3-bedroom townhouses, turning them into 4-bedroom townhouses, cash flowing $500 to $800 a month. I'll do that every day of the week if I can.
Yeah.
Because
and so you're doing student rentals.
We're doing student rentals. We're doing some standard family rentals.
Okay.
But adding that room adds that value and brings in, the multi-generational homes, brings in the larger families. Like we're not against the densification of those properties, even at a minor scale, because it's acknowledging the types of tenant populations that are here, right? A new immigrant family comes through, or just a family that's looking to maybe save a bit of money because there is an affordability crisis. They're looking at a 4-bedroom townhouse as a great option to raise a family and have, a cousin stay with them or an aging parent stay with them. So those types of assets are becoming more valuable, and the rents still keep going up. And for us, they're smart investments that they're not sexy. They're not going to be appreciating at 10 to 20% a year. They're just slow, stable assets.
Yeah, and that's what you want, though, right? You want, I think people got into real estate investing thinking that this was a get rich quick, and it was never that.
Yep.
It was always something that you bought and you held for long term to build your wealth over time.
Yep.
And you found something that made sense and it gave you some cash flow. Kind of set it and forget it as long as you can. But obviously you can't set it and forget it because there are moving pieces to it.
Yeah.
But people wanted to do the perfect BRRRR.
Yep.
and just to take every single dime out of their property, and that's not always the case.
Yep.
Right.
And how we're looking at it is, I've got 2 young kids, 2 and 4 months old. And if I look at each property that can cash flow, let's call it $500 a month. If I look at that at a 18-year horizon, let's say, or 16 and an 18-year horizon, that's a college fund per kid per house. And we're buying with partners, right? Cool. One house equals a college fund in 18 years. I'm not looking at selling that property in 2 to 3 years. Yeah, maybe I'll refinance it in a few years' time if values increase and I can do another one and scale that way.
Yep.
But in the most conservative sense, it's a 16-year hold that's going to pay for, college. Buy another one, that's maybe my kid's first down payment on their house in 22 years.
Right.
And so if you just look at it on those levels, you can start to build that portfolio. And we're actually finding JV partners who are in the later stages of life. They're in their 60s or 70s who are still open to this investment philosophy because they've made their money, right? And they want to start investing in long-term stable assets for their kids or their grandkids. Mm-hmm. So I think it's still a big opportunity that a lot of people have skipped over because money was cheap in the last few years and it was real sexy to do a perfect BRRRR or to flip a property real fast or to do some sort of rezoning and capitalize on that investment.
Right. All right. So listen, Hart, we're getting pretty close to the end here, but if you were to wrap it up in a minute, where do you see the property management industry going over the next few years? What are your thoughts on that?
Awesome question. I'll say in very short, I think the rental industry in general has been consolidating and aggregating for a couple of years now. I said this maybe 5 years ago, but there was going to be like large acquisitions, massive consolidation. I think right now, just like with most small to medium-sized businesses across the country and across North America, there's an aging population that's moving out of the industry. Yep. Lots of boomers had property, became real estate investors, became property managers, and then were very localized property management operations. I think there's going to be a lot of buyouts. We intend on buying some ourselves. And I think that the industry is going to move to a much more streamlined system where there's going to be a couple large players. There's going to be much more innovative systems that rely on technology. And a lot of the small mom and pop operations are going to get pushed out. But in the same way, there's going to be more competition between large players that can look at Ontario-wide, Canada-wide, North America-wide. And so I think it will depress the cost of property management. Right, so it'll depress the cost of our goods as well. So we'll have stable margins, but I think property management will be more accessible for the standard investor, and that's what we're trying to bring to the market too. We have a fully a la carte system. We were talking about this before. So in tough times, a landlord can take over, doing their own plumbing or having their own trade do the plumbing because cousin Jimmy is a plumber. We don't mandate you do that all through us. So we can be flexible, and then when you are ready to be fully hands off, we can do everything.
Awesome. Hart, listen, I appreciate your time. Q, thanks for dropping in. If anybody wants to learn more about what you do, Hart, and get in contact with you, how do they do that?
Just go to rentpanda.ca, go to Rent Panda on Instagram, Facebook, all the socials, and reach out. And I actually respond to every message that comes through. So happy to chat with anyone about anything, even if it's just real estate investing.
All right. What was that saying again on that commercial? Well, I'm not only the president, but I'm also a client.
Yeah.
That's it. The hair club.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Called for men.
Yes.
All right, Hart, I appreciate your time, and we'll do this again. And listen, if you are a real estate investor and you need help with getting your property rented out, reach out to the experts.
Awesome.
Hart, thanks, brother. Appreciate your time.
Take care, Hart.